Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. I was told that my microphone would start working the minute I started speaking, and so it has proved. My name is Simon Smith. I chair the steering committee of the Ukraine Forum here at Chatham House. Many years ago, 10 plus, I was the British ambassador in Ukraine, so from 2012 until 2015. And it's my great pleasure to welcome you all on behalf of Chatham House to this meeting. Thank you all for your interest and your commitment in the serious themes that we will be discussing. Our meeting tells us that we will be talking about destruction and recovery. The destruction caused by Russia's invasion of Ukraine is quite staggering. The total cost of reconstruction and recovery in Ukraine, according to a recent reliable estimate, the World Bank figures with which you're familiar, is around $588 billion. But that figure doesn't just speak of a massive task that's out there waiting for us to get to grips with, because recovery, as I'm sure we all share, is not the future. It has to be now, and it includes the job of sustaining economic stability and effectiveness in the face of an ongoing war, and preparing effectively too for what will be the most ambitious economic recovery project of the century. And for that project to succeed, there'll need to be successful collaboration right across Ukraine's partners, allies, supporters, and investors, and between the private sector and wider civil society. Now, over the last 4 years, the Ukraine Forum at Chatham House has sustained a really sharp focus on recovery, our ambition being to help convene and consolidate those partnerships I've just mentioned, those partnerships which are essential to this successful and productive and achieving recovery in Ukraine. We've made each year a special effort to convene focus on these partnerships in advance of the annual Ukraine Recovery Conference, and we are doing so again today. So that leads me just very briefly to salute the very special partners we have in our meeting today. First of all, I mentioned the Ukraine Recovery Conference hosted this year in Poland, and it's very good to have here with us the special envoy for reconstruction of Ukraine, representing the hosts of the Ukraine Recovery Conference, Paweł Kowal. We also have here top-class representation from 3 other institutions to whom we in Chatham House owe a great deal and for whose collaboration and cooperation with us we are deeply grateful. I should mention the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development right away, because they are our major co-hosts, co-collaborators and partners in this conference. I should mention the European Union, because that is going to be a crucial part of ensuring that this process of recovery is successful, ensuring that Ukraine's progressive integration with the European Union, that it enables and stimulates the deep structural reforms that are going to be required, the reforms that catalyse economic growth and enable social recovery and industrial reconstruction. And last but not least, the British government. I emphasise last but not least. I used to work for the British government, but it's extremely good to see here as well representatives of a government which has been extremely supportive of Ukraine and Ukrainians' efforts to stay vibrant and to stay focused on a bright future, even in some extremely difficult times, which of course, as our latest news is telling us, those times are very much continuing. I've already trespassed on the task of my dear colleague at Chatham House, Orysia Lutsevich, the head of the Ukraine Forum here at Chatham House. She will introduce to you the distinguished representatives of those institutions that I have just mentioned. But for now, a last mention is a very special tip-off to go and see if you can take a look at the exhibition which is upstairs here in Chatham House, which is entitled Step Inside Chernobyl. This will tell you a little bit about the EBRD's involvement with the financing of that enormous project. But I'm also instructed to tell you that it is, I think, the first ever time where a virtual reality exhibition has taken place in Chatham House. So don't miss it. Once again, a very warm welcome to you all, and I'll leave you in the expert and splendid hands of Orysia Lisevich. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. While my colleagues take away the lectern, I would like to welcome the panelists of the first session here, and that is Odile Renaud-de-Bassot, the president of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, Marta Kos, who came all the way from Brussels, the European Commissioner for the EU enlargement. Welcome, Marta. We have Stephen Doughty, traveled far away, Minister of State of the United Kingdom for Europe and North America, and last but not least, who made a really long journey, that's Oleksiy Kuleba, who is the Deputy Prime Minister for Reconstruction of Ukraine and the Minister for Territories and Communities of Ukraine. Well, welcome to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. We're really pleased to have this full hall for what Simon said is our joint partnership with the EBRD to pull together people who have resources, both financial and intellectual, to discuss how Ukrainian economy can be boosted today and what kind of future model is emerging to enable Ukraine's recovery, which will be enormous. I think it will be the biggest economic project of the century, to be honest, given what is happening and for how long this lasts. I would like to remind that this is on the record, that is not, some participants were disappointed. They thought in Chatham House is all going to be under Chatham House rule, but we want to make sure there's as much sharing of ideas about this topic as possible. So we're also live streaming, and if there are any, those who are watching us throughout the world, welcome also to our conversation, although virtually. Without further ado, I would like to say that as Ukrainian myself, I often hear people being irritated that we are talking about recovery when such horrible attacks are taking place. I mean, we've seen for the last 24 hours one of the largest, massive, deadly attacks with more than 1,000 drones, more than 50 ballistic missiles and cruise missiles. People dead. So all our thoughts and prayers go to those who suffered from this. But it's now became a maxim that it's armies who win battles and economies who win wars. And I think if we put this mindset together today, we want to discuss that. And I would like to start this discussion by inviting Odile first to share her thoughts about how EBRD actually sees the role of private sector, being one of the major investors in the real economy and the private engagement. And how do you see sustaining Ukrainian economy today through this private-public partnership or just private sector? And how can this lay the foundation for the future of Ukraine's economy? Please.
So thank you. First of all, thank you very much for co-organizing this conference. And for us, it's very, very important to indeed look forward, think about what we can do now, what we can do in the future, how to address the huge challenges that are there, but also really continue and mobilize support for Ukraine. And I very much agree with what you said about the role of the economy. Since the beginning of the war, EBRD has been very active in Ukraine since it was part of our mandate since we were created in 1992. But at the beginning of the war, we really thought about, people were talking about military support, budget support, but we really were thinking about the support for the economy, because if you want a country to be able to sustain a war, to get money to fund its military effort, to keep people in the country being able to live there despite the risk and so forth, you need to have the economy running, businesses being able to generate revenues, to create jobs, and so forth. So that's very much at the core of our mandate, because we are a bank which mandate is to support the private sector. And that's what we've been doing in Ukraine. We've invested almost 10 billion since 2022. So, and very, very much, largely to the support of our donors. And EU is one of our, clearly our major partner in that endeavor. And so this continued effort to keep the economy running is absolutely fundamental. And I see no opposition between sustaining Ukraine during the war and preparing the ground for reconstruction. Because in a way, what we are doing to support the economy is keeping the infrastructure functioning, access to energy, access to electricity, repair some key transport infrastructure that are absolutely needed for transit of goods and so forth. And one image, I was in Ukraine 2 weeks ago, and one image that struck me in that, and that symbolize this link between current recovery and the future is the visit we did on the CHP, one of the CHP of Kiev, which has been really massively...
What is CHP? Just
CHP,
for people to know.
So central heating station.
Right.
So it was really, you have 6 of them, I think, around Kiev, which was really producing the heating and some electricity for the city. And they have been hugely damaged in this winter, as a sort of, with the tactics of destroying key infrastructure to make life extremely difficult, and in this winter it was particularly difficult. And the level of destruction is appalling, with missiles have been really destroyed the infrastructure, but also just beside, you already see some reconstruction and new capacities being well thought through, being protected and so forth, so as to be ready for the next winter. And that combination of destruction, but also reactivity and resilience and capacity to rebound and to repair, I think this really symbolize what we see in what we've been seeing in the Ukrainian economy. So I was talking about our involvement with the private sector. Overall, 57% of our financing have been in the private sector, and a lot, much more projects, because projects are smaller than what we do in the public sector, which is mainly key infrastructure, access to energy and transport. And what we see in the private sector is one word, which I think is also true for the whole country, is the resilience. The fact that businesses have been able to continue operating and producing and transporting and have been adjusting to the circumstances in a way which is absolutely amazing. You have, of course, increased risk, security risk, the challenge to access finance, but also obstacles such as the increase of energy prices, restriction in transformation, and so forth. But in that challenging environment, with also difficulty to access human capital and so forth, the adaptability and the creativity and the resilience of the private sector is as I was saying, amazing. I just take 2 examples of companies we met in Kiev 2 weeks ago. One is Rosetka, online retail company, which has been developing and is really delivering. It's part of it's a private sector company, but really delivering common goods in order to dispatch and delivers goods in all the country, and which is thinking about how they can enhance their capacity in Ukraine and also expand internationally. In the neighborhood, in the countries in Poland, in order to diversify their own risk. So investment proactively in new capacities in order to get better access to EU market and so forth. Another company very well known in Ukraine, Oko, which is with a big fuel station network, which is diversifying away from fossil fuel and investing in sustainability and new energy supply and decarbonization agenda. And this also is amazing when you think about all the hurdles and the challenges related to the environment. One sector which is also absolutely obvious is innovation and energy and investment in the defense-related industries with all this startup ecosystem and so forth that developed into the drone capacities, and which are so key now to defend the country as an export source of revenues for Ukraine. So, this is taking place already, but of course more is needed, and there are things that need to be addressed in order for the private sector to flourish and to be able to rebound even more in the recovery, in the reconstruction phase. One thing which is coming back again and again is the de-risking and guarantee mechanism and so forth. And on that, we've been working there is no one single solution that will address the whole issue of the risk and the war-related risk. But we are trying to bring some solution on that. For example, developing a guarantee with the support of the EU, guarantee mechanism for investment in renewable, which are absolutely needed to generate more energy. And we are developing a mechanism of guarantee for price to help solving the problem of takeoff and stability of the system. The second thing we've been developing is a guarantee for transport, and with a mechanism there also relying on the donor funding, EU and other bilateral donors, to relaunch the local market of insurance for transport of goods and services. And one key contribution to the private sector we've developed is guaranteeing the risk taken by the banks when they finance SMEs in order to invest or to develop energy generation investment at their level and so forth. So all these instruments are part of the solution. There is, as I was saying, not a single solution, but this is absolutely important, and in particular targeting these areas where this is fundamental for the economy to work on. The second big, agenda item on how to facilitate private sector investment and so forth is the reform agenda. I think this is something where we've been very active in. Rule of law, good governance of state-owned enterprise, transparency, open competition, well-functioning market and so forth. Absolutely fundamental for investors, and to create the trust and the willingness to put some capital in new projects in Ukraine. And this is for foreign investors, but also for investors already in the country. And the third key component is something which is, for a bank, not necessarily the most obvious one, but is absolutely fundamental in Ukraine, is human capital. Because of the impact of mobilization, the internally displaced people or people having left the country, and the return of veterans, which is a huge challenge for the whole society and for companies and for people individually, of course. So this is something where we are very much focused, working with professional association, banking system, banking networks and so forth, in order to find appropriate solution to do that.
If I may
I see you all looking at me.
I'm looking because, apologies for that, but I think you really outlined these three very important pillars: supporting companies who are actually the backbone of, Ukrainians' own base for taxation and reliability, ensuring that there is de-risking for those who want to expand and come in, and also that there are people to men and women working for these companies. And I think, if you may allow, I will pass the floor to Commissioner to tell us a little bit how Ukraine is doing on the path to membership. I think that European Union was the first to actually give so much hope to Ukrainians, because when Ukraine received the candidate status in June of 2022, when you think about it, it meant that Ukraine was, is, and will be an independent state. I think United Kingdom then was inspired by this and signed the 100-year partnership as well, to basically say to Putin that Ukraine will be an independent nation that is worth being a partner, and it's a strategic partner. I will be peppered tampering a little bit with the data that we gather from Ukrainian civil society on recovery, and we will be releasing the latest data for the Ukraine Recovery Conference. But we already know that for Ukrainians, the recovery means modernization of institutions. It is very progressive agenda as people see it. They understand that everything must change for everything to almost be the same. The current governance model is not, it's sustaining Ukraine at war, but more is needed. And that's why they link the future with the European membership, with the market, hoping that will be a very strong catalyst. So Marta, when you know that Ukraine has a very, a high ambition to quickly become member of European Union, and how do you see this pathway right now, where Ukraine is, and what opportunities its tangible way it opens for investors? How can this boost their confidence?
It's remarkable what Ukraine is doing and achieving. You've been mentioning becoming a candidate for the EU membership 4 months after the war has started. Once I have asked the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, so how did you come to this idea? Mm-hmm. And he said, it was 4 days after the war started, we were in a bunker. And we were thinking what would be the best for the EU, and this was for Ukraine. And this was actually after Ukraine has decided to sign the deep and comprehensive FTA. At that time, nobody expected that the country will apply for the EU so quick. But this is also a sign, what actually EU membership is giving. You are listening carefully now. So what the EU is giving, no, we have met before, so so what the EU is giving is what you have in your title. It's about prosperity. What the EU giving is giving peace, is giving freedom, and is giving security. And this is so much connected, whatever we do with Ukraine today. And it is for the first time that we are negotiating with a country which is at war. And it is possible. And when I speak about Ukraine today, what Ukraine is delivering today is in my eyes, on 3 levels. The first level is you fight the war to survive. The second level is what you have mentioned, societal, but also economic transformation. Mm-hmm. Instead of reconstruction, I many times speak about construction of new Ukraine, what you are doing, modern Ukraine. And the third level is the accession process. Even in the times when bombs are falling on the country, you do this very demanding process for which even Sweden, who has been the most developed when starting negotiating, needed 3 years. Mm-hmm. And you are doing this well. Just in the context of what the accession means to Ukrainians, when I was there for the last time, somebody told me, Marta, you are not just our commissioner for enlargement, you are our commissioner for hope. Mm. You have mentioned hope at the beginning. You can't imagine how much this thought of becoming a member of the EU, having this perspective, is meaning to the people there. It's awful. The Russians are stealing your children. The bombs are falling. You were freezing during the winter. But you have this hope that the life in the European Union will be much better, and it will be. So this is for the context, but about the process itself, you have been mentioning a quick process. There is no quick process of becoming a member of the EU, and I will tell you the reason. So we are doing whatever possible, and the process has already been quicker than with any other candidate countries before. In 1 year, we have done the screening. This is the process of comparing the legislation of Ukraine with the European, what needs to be done. And then, of course, the basic reforms, reforms from judiciary, anti-corruption, public procurement, how the state is functioning. And we can't have a blind eye here. Why? If we will not take care about these most important reforms, fundamentals, we will not be able to produce a safe environment or legal certainties for international financial institutions and especially private investors to come. They will only come if they will see, or you will see, many among of you, if you will see that your investment will be safe and you will have the possibility to earn the money. This is very, very normal. So through the accession process, we are doing exactly this. And once this is happening, then this is the way to prosperity. You know, I love to tell the examples from the past. In 91, GDP per capita in Ukraine has been higher than in Poland. And Poland, through the accession process and being a member, has tripled its GDP, and now we have read, you know, that it is having the growth rates which are similar to those here in UK. So this is a whole process. We need the reforms. We need to make the legal certainties, and the third part is then the investments will coming and prosperity can go on. Of course, this question mark, when we will have the peace. You know, you were speaking about how economy is functioning, Odile, even during the war. So there are so many things we could admire what is happening today in Ukraine, and one of this is that actually the banking system is functioning. The railways is functioning, even if the bombs are falling. So the whole system. And, you know, whenever I'm there, I'm really, you know, Oleksiy, full of admiration. Kind of people try to live a normal life in the times when there is no normal life. And sometimes I miss this perseverance and motivation here in Europe, in the sense of, you know, nothing is given to you just like this, so you have to fight for this. So where are we standing? Now, after the change of the government in Hungary, I hope that we will soon be able to officially or formally open, yes, the gentleman is smiling, so yes, the government change in Hungary has brought some positive elements to the enlargement processes, and I'm happy about this. So we have to formally open all the clusters, and this will enable us to really do the negotiations. I hope that until the end of summer, we will have all of them open. Meaning once they are open, then we go, you know, chapter...
there are 6 clusters,
Six clusters. This is a technical part, but you know, it is, every accession process is technical and is also political because the member states have to have a say. But in this case, it is from the perspective which I see at the EU Ukrainians, it's also about having the prospect of living in peace and freedom. And this is the additional element, for instance, my country, Slovenia, and many others entering the EU in 2004 didn't have. We didn't have to think about peace or security. Another important element which I see is happening today in Ukraine is also when I was discussing with somebody from Germany, CEO from a well-known company, and explaining what is happening, he told me, this could be the second Wirtschaftswunder in Europe. So the Wirtschaftswunder in the sense of economic miracle, what happened in Germany after the Second World War. So I think it is possible if we do it right. Yeah. But also the government of Ukraine has to do it right, and that's why, you know, we also support the country in this. And you know, it is not just providing the aid. For instance, working with the EBRD, we have turned the UIF into a catalyst. This is an investment framework that turns every €1 of EU guarantee into €4 of real recovery. So this is what we can do.
That's the new mechanism that was set up during recently.
Through the Ukraine facility, where we have 50 billion just for this part. So I would invite investors to see our EU guarantees really as a bridge to bankable projects. And we also see collecting the interest for the European companies that it is huge, and we can do the de-risking. You also ask about short-term opportunities for investors. These are the sectors actually which are growing. Now it is a lot also about military and defense production, or dual use actually. And I think that if we will not invest, or European companies, somebody else will also come there. So we have many possibilities, and Ukraine is delivering. The implementation of the reforms is one of the highest of all the candidate countries, even if the country is at war. So I will finish with what, in my perspective, Ukraine needs for the prosperity. And this is first courage to continue the reforms. Secondly, Ukraine needs our EU's institutional anchoring, what we do, and of course, investors and capital of the international financial institutions. So we need to make sure that we work together. Yeah. And that's why I'm very happy that the biggest reconstruction conference this year in Poland, in Gdansk, we will discuss this. Are you ready?
We're ready.
Okay, then welcome.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Marta. I think it's important in time of war, what gives Ukrainians stamina and courage to persevere is that hope. We should never underestimate it. And it's not the kind of infantile optimism. It's not that Ukrainians understand that everything will turn out right. It's actually knowing what you need to do no matter how it turns out. It's, almost like when Ursula von der Leyen was saying, change or die. I think she was more talking about the European Union, change or die, because we are under attack. UK is under attack in a way through all kinds of means. I am happy that actually Ukraine is bringing the European Commission and the UK Minister for Europe and North America on stage together at this time, because from the very beginning it was understood that the European continent more broadly, not just European Union, has something at stake after Russia invaded Ukraine. So Minister, tell us, a little bit what opportunities this 100-year partnership opens, because I think it's important for UK investors here to hear that, and maybe focus a bit more on security, because UK-French-led coalition of the willing. How can this reassure also investors what's coming in a way of architecture for Ukraine? How can we protect Ukraine together?
Thanks, Arisia, and firstly, just to you and Alexei. I mean, obviously the attacks overnight were utterly horrific, sadly continuing in a pattern of brutal attacks that we've seen in recent weeks, and having been in Kiev myself when those attacks have been going on in the past, both the tenacity and resilience of Ukrainians under fire, ability to go about day-to-day lives, but also the devastating impact. And when you see the scenes of a 12-year-old girl and others just in the attacks overnight, I think that tells us something as well about the overall situation, which is that there's one party that's serious about peace, which is Ukraine, and partners around the world who are working for that, and another who isn't. I think that should be a lesson to the whole world right now. And I think I speak again about that sort of resilience under fire, because I mean you spoke about economies and militaries, but of course at the heart of both of those is the people. Yeah. And I never cease to be inspired by the Ukrainian people in every respect. The bravery on the battlefield and the sacrifice, the innovation to continue going about lives and driving forward an economy and deliver public services in that situation under huge pressure. But also that capacity to think about the future and to think about the future with hope, and to be planning for that future with hope. And I think that's really what it sits as an inspiration at the heart of the 100-year partnership as well, because I think it's really, really important. A lot of these meetings, a lot of these conferences we go to, it's about what support we are giving Ukraine now to stay in the fight, to be successful, to respond to the horrific present circumstances. But Ukraine is not some sort of, hapless, a victim in this. Ukraine is an active participant in its own success and resilience now, but also into the future. And quite frankly, as you said, not just for the UK, but also for Europe as a whole. It's a source of incredible economic and technological innovation, whether on the battlefield or in energy or in financial services or in digitalization. And it also should be teaching us huge lessons about, quite frankly, resilience and capability that I think many of us across Europe have sadly forgotten and not invested enough in, given that wider threat that we face from Russia and others. And I was very struck with a conversation I had with the mayor of Lviv when I was in Ukraine a few weeks ago, talking about not only the work that's done in terms of response to those who've been on the front line and rehabilitation and support, but also about resilience of the population, both psychologically, practically, and after having gone through that horrendous and difficult winter. So I would just always sort of caution that firstly, we have to remember there are people at the heart of this, and it's Ukrainian people who've shown time and time and time again that plan to defeat the country in 3 days didn't succeed. The plan to defeat Ukraine over the last few years hasn't succeeded, and it will not succeed, and that's why we're putting the investment and commitments we are across EBRD, EU, UK and other partners. And I think I also always come back from Ukraine with hope. I visited a school in Kiev where the kids had spent most of the winter having to spend multiple days in the bunkers for their lessons, without energy, without water, their school also doubling up as an invincibility centre. But yet those kids were still passionately learning. They were part of an educational exchange with a school in the UK. They were talking about the books they were reading. They were talking about their career plans for the future, the businesses they want to run, the joint ventures they want to run between the UK and Ukraine and Europe, the fact that they see their lives as potentially working and living in lots of different locations and delivering, you know, their expertise and hope to the world. And so that's why at the heart of the 100-year partnership we have so many strands. It's about our work together in defence, in security, in technology, in education, in skills, and I think that's what I would hope all European partners and other partners globally should be doing and thinking about Ukraine. This is a mutually beneficial partnership. You asked me to focus on some of the issues around security, but I will just say a little bit as well about some of the wider economic investments. But firstly on security, look, we are absolutely committed and resolute in our support for Ukraine. We will continue to work with others, not only now, but also to deter and defend in the future. And that's very much at the heart of what the Coalition of the Willing has been about. And also that this isn't, again, just about a willingness of us to put boots on the ground or technology in place, but about the ability to scale up and train up Ukrainians, and that they have the capacity to defend their own country in the future and to deter against future aggression. And again, that this is a two-way process, right? What Ukrainians can teach us about drone warfare, about innovative techniques, about responding to hybrid attacks, to cyber attacks, to information attacks, to new techniques on the battlefield. That is absolutely essential to the defence of the whole of Europe, whether it's to NATO, whether it's to the EU, whether it's to the UK individually, whether it's other fora. We work together closely with partnerships alongside the JEF and others, and I think that's going to be crucial. And I was talking with Pavel earlier on as well about what we can learn together in terms of drone manufacturing technologies. I saw this in Latvia a few weeks ago myself. We're on the economic side, obviously, continue to finance money through the EBRD and through BII as well. We fast-tracked the UK-Ukraine free trade agreement. We've provided huge guarantees in terms of UK export finance. We've got an AI centre of excellence, lots and lots of initiatives that I can go into. We're also looking at the insurance industry. I've been meeting with the incredible insurance industry here in London, but also in Bermuda, a UK overseas territory, because then ultimately if businesses are not able to get the insurance products and reinsurance products to be able to underpin those investments, we can provide guarantees, we can provide funding, we can have the best partnerships and the best innovations, but people won't go because they don't feel there's the insurance in place. So it's not just the security guarantees and the Coalition of the Willing, it's also the willingness of business to be able to generate those products in the insurance market to underpin investments going forward. And then lastly, I would truly echo a lot of what Marta said as well about reform and inclusiveness within Ukraine going forward. We've worked very closely with the Ukrainian government on so many different initiatives on public services. I saw the work the British Council was doing in terms of English language skills amongst the public service in Ukraine. I saw many examples of where we're working with the anti-corruption agencies, Ukraine's progress on those issues and going up the Transparency International ratings. All of those things are going to be crucial. And an inclusive political society that's able to respond to the needs of a population after a war is going to be crucial. We know this lesson from ourselves post the Second World War. It was about winning the peace and not just winning the war, and whether that's delivering homes for heroes, and whether it's including veterans in the future economy. A lot of our programming is looking at how we can work closely on that, will enable there to be sure footing into the future, and also that new cracks or difficulties don't emerge in what would be a very fragile and difficult period, you know, those first few years trying to rebuild, particularly in occupied territories or land that's been recovered. So we are a consistent, a permanent partner to Ukraine. I think we see a lot in Ukrainians that we saw in our own psychology and history, and that's why this partnership goes well beyond just any individual initiative or the support we're providing right now. And we will work with partners in the EU, within the EBRD, with the United States, with Canada, with others across the G7 to ensure that's the case.
Thank you very much, Minister. I think it's important that emphasis on human integral part in any of this what we are talking about. You know, Ukraine will not be Ukraine without Ukrainians. Ukrainian revolution in military affairs would not happen if people were not giving that innovation. And, you know, of course, we understand that a lot of investors, a lot of pension funds and institutional investors are very cautious, or they cannot because of their shareholder restrictions on investing right now in defense. But there are people who are setting up dedicated investment vehicles because there is that revolution in military affair that is taking place. And there will be a lot of dual use, and already is dual use. But I think in the midst of this rubble that we are, you know, honestly so shocked, and it's so painful to see something new is being born, obviously, because Ukraine is able it started the 5th year of courageous defense against Russia. Who would have thought? You know, I remember before the invasion, we all said, yes, Ukraine will resist, but we didn't expect that it would last so long and that Putin would be so stubborn, losing millions of people on the battlefield, still obsessed by, you know, taking some of these territorial gains, failing to do it, and then punishing Ukrainian cities, Ukrainian economy by these outrageous attacks that have no military objectives, destroying high-rise buildings in Kyiv. So we are in the very vicious fight, and it's great to see the strong coalition. And I would like now to bring the Deputy Prime Minister for Reconstruction of Ukraine and also the Minister for Development of Territories and Communities. I think that's Mr. Kuleba. He has also a quite large experience in rebuilding Kyiv region after Ukraine deoccupied a lot of its towns, Bucha, you all know, Irpin, you know these places by now. So he was leading the effort in rebuilding that. But last winter was terrible. A lot of critical infrastructure was destroyed. So I wanted to ask you, how are you preparing for the next winter? And where is the public-private opportunity in that, if there's so much necessary to rebuild the electricity grid, rebuild, you know, transport, rebuild railway? So, Mr. Kuleba, over to you.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. It is a great honor and pleasure to be here. And I want to thank all of you, Madam President, for your support, our reforms, for our joint projects, of course. Madam Commissioner, for your amazing efforts to our accession in the European Union. Dear Minister, for who Ukraine has felt from first days, unwavering support from United Kingdom, support our people. It is amazing, so thank you very much. And of course, all of you, dear friends, colleagues, partners, for your support our country. We just arrived yesterday in the evening, and for this hour, unfortunately, after the 3 days of so-called ceasefire, it continued big combined attack by drones, by missiles, and it doesn't stop.
Yeah.
Till now it continues, so more than 40 hours it continues. So this is our new reality. But in this time, it doesn't mean that our economy stopped. No. It doesn't mean that we're waiting when this attack stops and we will recover something. No. People now going to their works, our emergency staff start to recover what they can, and this is also our new reality. Maybe if it's possible, I can share with you some thoughts, because I think it's very important to be on the same page and to be on the same context. What happened now in Ukraine after the 4 years of full-scale invasion. I think that we have a unique configuration in Ukraine when we have two parts of our system. One part is completely destroyed, and it's true. It is about, of course, our infrastructure. We have estimate our losses more than $80 billion for now.
Just in infrastructure?
Yes, infrastructure. If we speak about housing, this is more than 400,000 objects, different types. So this is multi-story buildings, apartments, private buildings, public buildings. If we speak about our economic losses, so of course this is more than 50% of our capacity. If we speak about our energy system, before the full-scale invasion, it was our energy system was near 30 gigawatts, 30 gigawatts. Now, not more than 14. So this is on the one hand. On the other hand, I think that we have some areas where we more strengthened than that it was before the full-scale invasion, and I think that in some areas we can share our experience and our skills with other world. I think that we are now anti-fragile in our social cohesion, and this is, I think, our main reason why we are so resilient till now. And I think that we also very strengthened in our decentralized communities, our reform. It's in the from first day of full-scale invasion, it was very important that our communities stay more stronger for last 10 years. And of course, all of this depend on our battlefield, because you know, my own experience, I was appointed as a governor of Kyiv region before 10 days before full-scale invasion started. And I remember how it was when 40,000 Russian troops went out from Belarus. And of course, it was impossible imagine how to protect our people, our country, and we had, you know, Turkish drones, Bayraktar. It was a game changer on the battlefield, and it was something amazing. Now, after 4 years of full-scale invasion, it is impossible to use it on the battlefield. But we know what we have to use, what type of different drones, of interceptors, and so on. And you know, it's if I may share, I had a meeting with Marta Kos last month in Brussels. It was an honor for me, and I share with Marta that I read a news about Emir of Qatar, who said that after the drones attacks, they lost more than 17% of gas generation of whole country. And they start to think about how to decentralize gas generation for their country. I read this message, and I wrote to my Prime Minister message with such context that I think that I know what the Emir of Qatar would say in 2 weeks, in a couple of weeks or in a couple of days. Not because we are so smart. We didn't want to have such experience, but unfortunately we have, and we know what will happen next. And of course it depends also when we speak about Europe, new safety strategy in Europe. Unfortunately, we know what will happen next. And if we speak about Europe accession, it is a real dream of our country, but I think that the main challenge is time. Because, you know, this is like example from recovery. We have 2 years ago, we had a big infrastructure project. And in 1 day, we start discuss it with IFI and with our government. And we understand that we have to build it in 8 or 9 months, complete this project. And we start to construct. And with IFI, we have dialogue, discussions, and so on. And after 9 months, IFI told us, we complete all negotiations, we complete all procedures, procurements, we are ready to start. Our answer was, thank you very much. It is very value for us, but we yesterday completed all project. We constructed. And it is also not because we're so smart. It is because we have no chance to move another way, just in that way. And it costs, unfortunately, thousands of our lives. So it is not about smart decision. It's not about, it is our survival and it is our resilience. And if we speak about what we have to do next winter, of course we prepared, and we really thank for our partners, for European Commission, for EBRD, for our friends from other countries, because we really prepare not for only next winter. We are ready for next years. But as we have a strength and as anti-fragile in our cohesion, social cohesion, from another hand, unfortunately, we really need support materially. Because...
And sorry, what are the estimated needs for immediate reconstruction for a year, roughly, just for people to understand?
If we will estimate, as we calculate with RDNA 5, it is more than $500 billion. This is our...
That's overall.
Overall,
but
yes.
if you prioritize something that you need between now and next year?
5.4 billion.
5.4 billion.
Yes. This is all that... sorry.
Immediately for rapid reconstruction.
I think that it's not about rapid reconstruction. You know, what does it mean for us now? Reconstruction, it's not about the concrete. You are all understand me that in Ukrainian, the main value is people. And if we want continue to fight, to recover our country, to do all this process, we have a huge potential, as you understand better than me. But it's really needs people, quality, democratic values, and so on. So that's...
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think it's important and interesting emphasis on anti-fragility, which is a bit of a different concept than resilience. It's related, and maybe somebody will have a question to that. I mean, if you don't mind, dear panelists, I will take a few questions from the floor, because I think we have a very, very interesting and high-level diverse audience. So maybe I take 3 questions, and if you can address directly the question to any of the panelists, it will just be easier. Yes, please, gentleman over there, and then over there. Over there, yeah? And then over there. Just introduce yourself, please, and address the question. Possible. Yeah. Go ahead.
My name is Richard Castle. I'm a head of legal of Lim Miliband. I specialise in international law and a case before the International Criminal Court of Justice. I'm very interested in potential legal claims to the ICC concerning this military conflict in Ukraine, and I would like to address a question to Stephen Doughty. And this question concerns the origins or the root causes of the conflict in Ukraine, because with the reconstruction and the recovery, I think it's very important to consider the causes of the conflict. And I remember in 2022, when the conflict began, it was international relations sovereignty dispute. There was ambitions from Ukraine to join NATO, and then there was defiance and challenge by Russia, which caused this military conflict. And I think the peace negotiation did involve some sort of territorial swaps. So with the reconstruction then, is it necessary to consider the military alliance ambitions of Ukraine?
Okay, thank you very much. Well understood the question. Yes, please, over there.
Good afternoon. My name is James Nixie. I work for the Stockholm Centre for Eastern European Studies, and I'm a former colleague of yours, Arisia. We know from other wars in the world that the path to prosperity comes partly through the successful reintegration of veterans into society. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the EBRD, the EU, and the UK are all putting funds to this end. So my question, therefore, is, for the person I've not mentioned, for Alexei, how can their funding and efforts best be coordinated and directed to that end?
Yes,
thank you.
Good question. Thank you very much, James. Over there, yes?
I'm Alexandra Kudas, BBC Future Voices. This conversation brought a lot of hope for Ukraine reconstruction, build better. My question will be for the Deputy Minister. With many disabled veterans are returning to their communities where they still can't get out of their house, cross the street, or get to the shop because some basic accessibility is missing. My question is that in the Ukraine reconstruction for projects, who will be verifying the accessibility standards are met, and what happens when the local authorities fail to meet them and the money already ran out?
Thank you. So 2 related questions. This is more applied in the specific question of accessibility. So maybe we'll start with Marta, because I think you are putting quite significant investments through the EU facility into also human capital reconstruction, recovery that includes veterans. Marta.
What Alexei was saying is really important, and you, Odile, too. It's really about the people. So we many times speak about infrastructure and housing and everything. So we already have some very successful projects. The last time I was in Lviv, I have visited veterans who are living in the apartments built by the European money when they came back. So it was very touchy. They invited me, they cooked for me, we talked. So it is a very important question of the integration, so that they will have a job. So this is for them the most important part. The housing, they told me, we will survive, but being recognized in the sense of we can contribute something to the society. So this is very important. Housing also too, and then their family members. Most of them are out of the geographical areas where they grew up. So this is also very important, you know, how the broader society is taking care of them. So the best way, and this is how we do, is we talk to Alexei and the government because they know the best. Oleksi's team know not just about the Kiev, but all around the country where there are the needs, and this is very important. And speaking about the people, this is not connected to the veterans, it's also, Ukraine will need people, many people, Ukrainians who are now living around Europe or in the world. So what we already do is when we speak about the companies from Europe who are willing to invest in Ukraine, that we connect them with very skilled Ukrainians working here in Europe who would not be willing to go back to Ukraine if they will have no jobs. But if we connect them so that they will be sure you will go there, you get a job and take care of housing. So this is what we already plan to do.
Thank you very much, Odile.
No, I mean, in human capital, what we do is, because we work a lot with different companies in the private sector and so forth, and in each financing, in each project we do, to try to bring something that will help yet have an impact on human capital. So it could be help the companies to work on them and think about their workforce planning and what kind of people they could recruit and so forth. It can be about accessibility of, for example, offices for people to be able to. It can be about training, reskilling people, helping veterans which come very often with trauma and so forth from the war, to reintegrate and adjust to working environment and so forth. So on 80% of our project, we have something which technical assistance, additional funding and so forth, which can address human capital. So it's very decentralized, but it's, I think, also very impactful to mobilize and to increase the awareness of the private businesses how they can contribute to that.
And what is interesting, I think, in that kind of partnership model is that you have funders, you have companies, you have Ukrainian civil society, and in our survey we noticed that a lot of non-profits are already reporting that they are working, providing services, and that they believe that veteran reintegration is #1 issue for actually resilience and for anti-fragility or social cohesion, the way you want to call it. There's also a sentiment among the veteran community. I think yesterday my colleague Yaroslava shared information from Ukrainian Veteran Fund that they do want to set up businesses. They don't want to be always getting social subsistence or being, on a burden to the society. They want to be, actually they want to contribute to society. They want to be productive part of, if possible, as much as possible. So that's interesting, maybe, and I know there are some microfinance grants already for veterans, but Oleksiy, would you like to come into specifically about accessibility in infrastructure, because you also oversee some infrastructural recovery, and what's happening in Ukraine on that front now?
Thank you very much that you raise up this topic because it's really sensitive, and as we understand for now, for this day, it will be more than 1,000 of people that we will need to support in this. This is our priority #1, and this is responsibility also of our ministry. And we work hard together with communities because it is all about learning and studying. And of course, this is about new standards. And we made a lot of projects. For today, it is about like startups, but we need to understand how it can work because it's also very dynamic. Because if 3 years ago we have one type of needs for this for our people, unfortunately today this is another kind. Why? Because once again it is change of military technology and new type of drones and new types of injury. And this is 1 year, and we have quite another picture with our people. But we continue to work with this, of course, and we have amazing private initiatives like Unbroken, like Superhumans. And I think that it's also, we can say that it's a new strengths and skills of our country. And this is best practices that we will implement it in our society.
And I think it's interesting to put in context that there's also the Ministry for Veterans, the Ministry of Social Policy, and ideally they should be working together on an overarching strategy, specifically looking at how this is implemented at the community level, which is also your realm of responsibility, because you spoke about decentralization. A lot of this, like the journalist says, will be implemented at the local level. So how do you connect, the dots from the national level to the local level? It's a challenge in every society.
How it works in Ukraine. I will give you an example. Sorry that I'm always about examples,
That's
but
good.
I think that it's the best thing how to understand us. We in this winter it was very hard, and we understand that we need not only like emergency reaction for this constant shelling. We start to implement a government program of resilience, communities and cities. And we raise up questions from our communities to regional level and till national level. So in this case, we have to do in the same thing. So all our needs in communities.
Yes.
But it doesn't mean that our communities know everything, they understand everything. It is always about coordination. It is always about learning, studying. And the main problem for us, as I said, this is time. We have no time because unfortunately circumstances are always changed.
Minister, would you like to speak? But I know UK government spends a lot also on social recovery and making sure that is front and central as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, I come from a family of veterans, and I've seen, and I love just using examples as well, my own cousin who had fought in Afghanistan and Iraq, came back and set up a very successful plumbing and electricity business and is providing for his family and his community, and applying the very skills that I think veterans are so incredible at, not just the obvious bravery, but they're amazing planners, organisers, innovators, managers, inspirers, all the things you would want at the core of a successful business or a successful enterprise. So it's not only an absolute necessity to incorporate and provide opportunities for veterans beyond immediate support and rehabilitation. It's actually potentially the source of an extraordinary, innovative and dynamic Ukrainian economy and society in the future, and not just in those who've got defence expertise or drone technology, but all of those core transferable skills. So I think it's essential for Ukraine, but actually it's going to be a route to Ukraine's future too. I wanted to respond to the gentleman who obviously raised a direct question with me. Look, there is one person who is responsible for the damage and destruction that we're seeing in Ukraine, and the death of the civilians that we saw last night, and for the attacks that have gone on while we've all been there, and for the wanton destruction, torture, sexual violence, and every other horror that we've seen over the last few months, and that is Vladimir Putin and the Russian government. It's nobody else. Root causes is a Kremlin narrative. Ukraine was invaded and violated in complete a violation of the United Nations Charter and against all principles of international law, and the way that they have conducted this war has been in complete violation of all international principles, including, may I say, the abduction of 20,000 Ukrainian children and attempts to indoctrinate them in one of the vilest crimes, which I was talking about with Marta just this week in Brussels. So when we want to talk about who's responsible and who needs to pay, there is one person and one country, and that's Russia. That's why we're very proud to be part of the International Claims Commission, the Register of Loss and Damage, the special tribunal efforts, because they're not just crucial for justice in its principle and adherence to international law, but they're also crucial because they need to pay for the damage that they've done. And we will continue to work with Ukraine and everybody else on this panel to achieve that. So I won't hear anything about root causes. There's one person responsible, it's Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
And just to reiterate, we recently hosted actually a roundtable here on the stage on transitional justice and the special tribunal. And for people to understand, there cannot be amnesty for war crimes. That is not an issue that will be negotiable with Russia simply because the way we believe the international order and law should be upheld. So this is, you can watch that webinar online on our website if you would like to get more nuance about that. And I saw Deputy Prime Minister's hand to comment, or, yeah.
I always can comment.
You caught my eye and I saw the two fingers. Well,
I just wanted to, also, I'm just going to say this, but this idea that somehow this started in 2022,
yeah.
right? Illegal annexation of Crimea in 2014, illegal invasion of Georgia back in 2008, chemical weapons being used on the streets of this country, radiological weapons being used on the streets of this country, right? This is a litany of actions against international law and international principles. So let's not get caught up in any of these myths.
And if it's possible,
yeah.
it is, believe me, it is not a conflict. It's very sensitive for me, heard that it is a war.
It's a war, yeah.
It's war, and we have to say that it's war. It is no a conflict, you know.
Or a crisis.
I am Russian language Ukrainian. I know Russian culture better than even middle of Russians. I read Pushkin, Tolstoy, Bulgakov, and so on. Believe me, this is not about conflict. This is not about culture. This is just war. They want to kill all Ukrainians. And do you know what happened with people, with men, who stay on the temporary occupied territories in Donetsk and Lugansk? They are all in Russian armed forces.
Yeah.
It's not a big amount of people, just maybe 2 million.
Yeah. I don't want to eat too much into the next panel that David will be now moderating, but if I may, just a quick fire question, because that's an interesting question that's on the next panel. How would you say how Ukraine is an asset to Europe? Quickly, one fire question. Who can start first? Why Ukraine is an asset, or is it an asset?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I would say capacity to innovate, now the defense industry and the resilience and all the military capacities. I think that's a huge asset for Europe.
And you know, we are not doing this helping Ukraine out of charity. We are doing this also because of us. Ukrainians are protecting us already now. And that's why, you know, this, whatever we do for Ukraine today is because they are also protecting what is so precious to us. These are European values. This is believing in democracy. And this is, you know, if we just let Putin do what he is doing and winning with this, then we are at the end. So this is why we are doing it. It is in our own interest and also protecting us.
Thank you.
I mean, I'd agree with all of that, but you know, just say quite frankly also because Ukraine has given us all a wake-up call to the reality of what happens if you let this kind of aggression go unchecked and the consequences for all our societies, and whether that's the resilience of our energy systems or the ability to respond to, you know, frontline war, as Alexei said. You know, quite frankly, it's a wake-up call to all of Europe and all of our societies, and we need to start realising the type of world that we live in.
Okay, Alexei?
I think that we can give a new model of resilience. I think that we can give a new model of modern recovery, I hope, and of course a new model of safety architecture where it includes military technologies and so on.
Well, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in the round of applause to this amazing panel.
take your seats. Thank you very much. Thank you. Hello, my name is David Lubin. I'm the Senior Research Fellow in a Global Economy and Finance program, and I'm delighted to be moderating this discussion, Win-Win, Ukraine Security and Recovery as an Asset for Europe, a title that Orissia sneakily gave away about 5 minutes ago. Let me introduce quickly my panel. To my immediate left is Muriel Lacoue-Labarthe. She's the Special Envoy of the French President for Ukraine's Recovery and Reconstruction. To her left is Yuri Butsa, the Government Commissioner for Public Debt Management at the Finance Ministry in Ukraine. To his left is Fabrizio Mazza, Managing Director and Global Public Agency Leader at Marsh. And the empty chair will be soon filled, we hope, by Pavel Kowal, who is Poland's Special Envoy for Reconstruction of Ukraine, of course in the context of Poland's hosting of URC 2026. What I propose to do is to allow our panelists a few minutes each to set out their thoughts, and then we'll engage in a question and answer session that I hope will be illuminating. Muriel, let me start with you. Let us hear what you have to say. Thank you very much and welcome to Chatham House.
Thank you very much for having me. So I'll start by picking up on the last question that Orissia asked. To us, we see our relation with Ukraine as an economic partnership. Ukraine is not just a recipient of financial support, but clearly Ukraine has always been a powerhouse when it comes to agriculture and a very strong contributor to world food security. Clearly, it has had for the past few years a very innovative high-tech sector on which it has built the most innovative and able to raise at scale defense industries in Europe. Ukraine has the potential, once its energy system will stop being bombed systematically by Russia, to become one of the main contributors to energy security in Europe. It has an energy mix that is built on gas and very strong reserves, but also on civilian nuclear energy. It has a massive potential when it comes to renewables, to biogas as well. And clearly, in a context where the whole of Eastern Europe's industry needs to finalize its decoupling from Russian gas, Ukraine is obviously a very strong contributor. Of course, this economic partnership is happening at war, and we are building this in a moment when the Ukrainian government has to do everything at once. It has to keep a state running, it has to continue provide public services, it has to ensure that war is financed, it has to ensure that macroeconomic stability is there. And we know that they do that very competently, but we also, as partners of Ukraine, try to provide a sort of financial network of instruments by which we try to ensure some safety for Ukraine to continue working. This, of course, has evolved because war has been going on for far too long, but this also requires that we constantly adapt our instruments. We started with humanitarian support, then we came with budgetary support through the IMF, through the EU. We used proceeds of Russian immobilized assets to collateralize our loans. Now we are doing, as Europeans, joint borrowing I forget the word, in a limited coopération renforcée, you know what I mean, in a French speakers, help me.
I'm sorry.
Well, not of the EU members contributing to the loan, but joint borrowing in order to ensure the Ukraine support loan. Which is now released. Initially, when we started doing military support, it was by using equipment that we had. Now we are evolving into financing the procurement of military equipment by Ukraine, because Ukraine has also now an industry it can provide from and at the same time equipment available is not necessarily available anymore on our side. So we try to put in place instruments that ensure a macro stabilizing environment. And of course, we also come as support at a more micro level, either by providing guarantees to multilateral development banks or by involving our own development finance institutions. Perhaps I can also shed a little bit of light on a few projects that, as France, we are very keen on continuing. One is that bilaterally we have created a grant fund that started in 2024 with 200 million at the time. We did 19 projects. I think 18 and a half of them have gone through in the period that was planned for. The aim of this grant fund is to bring small and medium enterprises to Ukraine for them to learn how the market works and for them also to prove themselves in order to show whether they have provision of goods or services that can be of help in the current context in Ukraine. And we do that through a grant in order for that seed money to transfer into investment afterwards.
With any particular sectors it targeted, or?
Civilian sectors,
right.
Initially. And so we are very happy to see that some of the companies we've brought and that the Ukrainian government selected, because we put the money, but the Ukrainian government is selecting them. We see those companies trying to invest in Ukraine now. Another level of investment to which we are contributing, and Pavel could speak about that as well because Poland is involved as well, is what we call the European Flagship Fund, which will be announced officially at the URC, and where the Commission, the EIB, Poland, Germany, Italy and France are involved through our DFIs, where we want to have an infrastructure fund that will be able to invest in Ukraine in order to continue building further infrastructure. Another fund that I can mention is the Phoenix Fund, to which we've contributed as well, which is the first venture capital fund directed towards innovative SMEs in Ukraine and starts operating. So we are trying to put this network of financing instruments in place in order not just to stabilize macroeconomically, to contribute to this stabilization, but also to bring in investment, because that's what we do as Europeans. We build security through economic interdependence. We've been doing that since 1950, and the steel and the steel and coal community at the time. What this requires, and a number of speakers have spoken about that at the same time, is that Ukraine continues to do everything at the same time. And that also entails a lot of work on reforms. Because, as a number of people have already said, this reconstruction, this recovery is also led by the private sector. It's impossible that enough public money would be gathered to meet with the financial needs of this recovery. So in that respect, there's a lot of reforms that need to still be carried out, even though a lot has already been done. And it is our responsibility as creditors to ensure that the conditionality that are in the IMF program, in the EU loan, are consistent also with the European project of accession that Ukraine has and that we support. But that means also a lot of transformation of the economic sectors and the way they function. It's going to take some time for the transportation system to be able to open to competition the way European competition functions. It's going to be an adjustment for the energy system to remove a number of social tariffs and focus them on those in needs, because at some point competition will be brought into the energy sector. It's the same for the taxation system. It needs to be completely a level playing field for both foreign and Ukrainian companies operating in the country, which means you'll have a lot of distributional effects. So all of us know that it's very difficult to carry that out already in peacetime. None of us wants to underestimate how difficult it is in wartime, in addition to already doing a transition of this economy. But we also are very, very trustful in the project of Ukraine, which is to transform away from the economic model of its aggressor and into a European country.
Very interesting. Thank you very much. Muriel described some incredibly innovative mechanisms for rather small-scale funding, but at the kind of broader macro level, you know, the IMF's funding assessment for 2026, 2029 is something like $150, $160 billion, and has some very ambitious targets for
reducing the debt GDP ratio over time from 120-something% towards 70% in the 2030s. And I wonder how anxious you feel as Ukraine's debt manager about your capacity to deliver those debt GDP ratios and how you expect to manage the public balance sheet in such stressful times.
Thanks, David, and first of all, it's a great pleasure being here. I often speak under Chatham House rules, but first time speaking Chatham House.
Oh, welcome.
Not under Chatham House rules this time, as far as I understand. Look, it's a very tricky question you're answering, because first of all, the core and single reason for Ukraine debt metrics to worsen and Ukraine debt to increase is actually a Russia war. An attack of Ukraine, because we need to spend a lot of on defense, and it's very hard to do fiscal consolidation when you need to defend your country. So we will not be able to come back to discuss this question in numbers before actually the war is over. But when the war is over, the policy dilemma becomes even more tricky, because your choice is between fiscal consolidation and ensuring that the economy is recovering. And how to balance these two things right, that I think is a very important question to discuss. And that brings me to the point of what is Ukraine recovery in the first place, and what does it mean in terms of like financing and implication for the economy. And we often operate, with the numbers of $500 billion plus. We heard it on the previous panel, which is World Bank RDNA report, which shows how much of everything was damaged by Russia. And this number, I don't really like this number, and I explain why. This number is very good to show the results of Russia attack on Ukraine, and this number is very useful for the future reparation claims. But this number is not really indication of how much resources should be spent and where they should be spent, because we're not talking about the recovery and rebuilding of the country in the terms of rebuilding what was damaged. We need to talking about what we're building new and what is the goal. And I think to point out one single goal of the recovery and the rebuilding of the country is actually to ensure the high level of economic growth. And it is important from multiple aspects. High level of economic growth gives you the possibility to give opportunity for people who stay in Ukraine to get economic options, to stay in Ukraine post-war, not to live to look for the better environment. It gives you opportunity to reintegrate people who will come from war, and veteran policies is really one of the trickiest for any government to handle. And the high growth and a lot of job opportunities in the country is important and probably key element. It also gives you opportunity to bring back people from outside of the country. And we have good examples of countries like all over from Poland to Greece, when people actually started to come back in masses from other EU member states when there is high growth inside the country. And there is the question, okay, how do you achieve the high level of growth? And there is, obviously, I'm trained economist, so the economic theories, you can do it through the government investments, also the private investments. I think we have natural limitations here in Ukraine for one of those too. But I think the backbone for any economic growth in the country is EU accession. And the previous panel was very interesting in that respect, because if Commissioner Kos mentioned Poland as a good example, Poland had the same GDP levels as Ukraine back in 1990. And look, the difference now is obvious. Even pre-war, difference was obvious. And for Poland, in my view, it's a combination of two things pretty much, is the very right selected and timely policies and the benefit of economic accession to EU and full EU accession. So I think in case of Ukraine, full EU accession is really the prerequisite, it is the backbone for any successful recovery, especially if you talk about recovery driven by the private money. And what, as a person whose primary responsibility is the debt management, I can tell you that we'll not be able to finance a post-war recovery with the public funding. Our debt to GDP is 90% already. It's going to grow. We try to work to make sure that debt cost at least is low, but we cannot get rid of increasing the debt because we need to finance the defense of the country. So the headroom for the country to increase the borrowings to invest to the economy post-war will be unfortunately very low. And it means that the only way out of this is to ensure that you maintain macro stability, but also ensure the high level of growth is private sector and private investments, and preferably equity rather than debt investments. And here there's incentives already now. There are obviously bottlenecks to overcome to bring investors. And there is facilities which are put in place by our European partners, by IFIs together, to help to promote this growth. What you mentioned, you bring in with the grant financing French companies, for example, to Ukraine, or European company to Ukraine. So they start looking at this as a business opportunity, and even in the times of war, it's super important because some of those companies did first project finance with your support, for example, but now we see that they open the shop in Ukraine and go in and trying to do projects without actually grant support already because they see the economic value of this. So those type of projects is super important. I think Muriel very well mentioned the sectors which can be really interesting because we should not look at the growth in Ukraine in terms of as a competition to growth in Europe. It should be a really supplementary effort. And there are some areas where we really can add a lot of value and actually can boost the growth in Europe, which is really not probably there where European countries want it to be. Like defense is one obvious one. So the level of technology is uncomparable. We know what is a modern war. And R&D cycle in Ukraine is a matter of weeks. We have tons of data, what the war looks like. You know, there is a lot of this anecdotal evidence about Ukraine units coming to the NATO these trainings and just show to the NATO armies what is the modern war and kicking out all this heavy machinery within 20 minutes. So we have all this knowledge and we have the technologies being developed, and this is probably the key asset we can bring to EU. The second one, as also you mentioned, is energy. We have a big energy potential, not because of right reasons. Russia just destroyed a big part of our traditional generation, so we had to do something with that. I think energy changes in the energy market in Ukraine is really interesting in terms of approach, how the government can get the policy right and boost the investment without spending money from the budget, because Russia, I think, destroyed more than 50% of electricity generation in the country or damaged. One obvious choice would be to go and try to rebuild all these coal power plants and all this type of stuff, spending public money, but we don't have public money and probably is not part of normal behavioral to rebuild the coal thermal stations. So what we did, we just created environment for the private capital to come and get the return on investment within a couple of years. And if you look at Ukraine energy mix in the last 3 years, the only segment which is growing massively is renewables, both wind, solar, storage facilities. When you travel to Ukraine through Poland, you see all these elements of wind farms being stored and brought to Ukraine. And this is the new Ukraine energy mix, you know, and it's driven by private sector. It's supported by EBRD, EIB, others. It's mostly driven by domestic investors because for them it's more profitable than any other types of investments. But we're waiting for the international players to come, and once there is a clear signal that Ukraine energy market becomes a part of European markets fully, we implement all the legislation. On our side, I think we voted now last month on all the crucial elements of the single market framework. But once you understand that you can invest your money in Ukraine, you can sell your electricity in Ukraine, but you can sell it also in Europe, and it's like renewable electricity, and there is the transport rules of the game. This will be a game changer for the sector when companies from outside, like Total Energy, one of those, potentially others, can come, you know, and invest there in scale. And because there's another side story, but because Ukraine, if you don't invest in electricity, we don't have the electricity, and it's a bit cold in the winter without electricity, and a bit dark. So we don't have a really big opposition to building more solar, more wind, as you can see in other countries, right? Because for us, it's essential thing in terms of surviving in the country. The third element would be probably agriculture, which also you mentioned. I know difference in Ukraine in agriculture policies vis-a-vis Europe is we treat it as industrial policy, not as cultural policy. So that's why we have big companies with possibility to invest and develop. We are providing food security not only to Ukraine, we are provider of food security to Gulf countries, to Northern Africa. We can provide food security to Europe, and including with all the mounting pressure of cost of living. So I think it will be probably a bit more tricky discussions in the first two areas, but I think that's where we definitely can have a win-win approach. So indeed, I think first, just to sum up, the recovery of Ukraine is about growing and about growth. Growth of Ukraine is not possible without EU integration and EU support and having a mutual benefits between us.
Very interesting. Thank you very much. Can I just quickly ask, I mean, at the point where the war ends and reconstruction begins, the willingness of investors to enter Ukraine will partly depend, I think, on the public sector balance sheet. You know, in other words, the bigger the debt stock, the more resources that will have to flow to existing creditors, the more reluctant new investors might be. So there's a slightly tricky situation where you'll want to, in theory at least, you might want to impose a lot of pain on existing creditors to take haircuts in order to clean up the public sector balance sheet as a way of catalyzing new investment. And I wonder how you think about that sort of dilemma.
Look, I think we solved it already because we put all the pain to the private investors last 2 years. So we concluded the debt restructuring. So we are now talking about the portfolio investors. I was talking more about the direct investments in my intervention. Indeed, there is this risk that next restructuring might be needed.
Yeah.
This risk is driven, a bit back to how the framework works. So if we are right about our macro forecast that the economic equilibrium in Ukraine, which is now, will be until the war ends, and there it will be a growth post-war, then debt is sustainable now because private sector delivers the contribution, official sector agreed for the standstill and will deliver their share post-war. By the end of 2029, we just signed the memorandum with the government creditors of Ukraine, held by Paris Club Secretariat last month. So debt is sustainable under the baseline assumptions. So we don't need to assume any extra effort. But the debt is obviously growing, so the only thing we cannot control the stock of the debt. So what we can control is the cost and the repayment. So just to put it in numbers, so the debt to GDP in Ukraine in 2021 was 47%. Now it's almost 90%. The debt service cost on external debt went from 4.5% to 1.6%. The average maturity of the debt doubled. So yes, on paper we get more debt stock, but does it matter for the budget? No, because we pay less. EU covers kindly all the interest for the EU debt. Some other countries find the nice ways to structure it in the grant format or in the contingent liability. Now the 90 billion of facility with EU upfront, we agreed to structure the contingent liability, not the debt, so Ukraine budget will not suffer. So yes, if you look simplistically on the metrics, you see the debt stock, which is approaching Italian, but if you look at what does it mean in practice, it means not much, because if you cannot control the stock, the good debt management is to control the flow, and we're trying to control the flow to the extent possible.
Thank you very much. Fabrizio, you are sole representative of the private sector on our panel today. Tell us how you see risk management in the context of post-war reconstruction.
Yes, I was noticing actually that I was the only member of the private sector here, and it's good, I think, to give a slightly different perspective, and I'm very pleased that a lot of the talk is around bringing private sector into Ukraine in due course. And actually, I picked up on what Commissioner Butza was saying. At the moment, the investors in the country really are domestic investors. International investors are not looking at Ukraine in any meaningful way unless behind a public mandate. Maybe just to give a little bit of a background, because where I come from, why do I do this? So Marsh McLennan is a professional firm, very large, and we've been in Ukraine advising the government on various topics, including the critical mineral deal, energy, security, etc., etc. But I sit in the risk distribution part of the business. So I work on credit risk transfer and political risk. And I work a lot with public institutions to do that. Now, in Ukraine, there is a huge pipeline of potential, very interesting projects, which would demand international investors' contributions. And in order also to keep the budgets, the balanced budgets on the government balance sheet, a lot of these projects requires financing, and that is partly being taken care of by IFIs, both the development financing institutions, and particularly through the UIF that we have heard that provides counter guarantees to these institutions. So the European Commission is using that money to facilitate an increase in the debt portion of that financing. But there's a critical point missing, which is essentially the equity component of this financing, because without that, really there is no investment, because the debt itself cannot really finance these projects. And that is currently absent, bar a few institutions. I mean, you will have heard of MIGA, part of the World Bank Group. There are some other public sector insurers. Export Credit Agency do a little bit of that. And again, there is an agreement with European Investment Bank and the UIF to provide some counter guarantees to facilitate that protection on investment. But it's never really been an ECA bag to provide that protection, except for the Chinese. Simon Sure has got a huge book of that type of business. Essentially, a lot of that is always being provided by the private sector. Probably 50% of the global PRI capacity comes from the private sector. I mean, it's a shame the minister has gone, because really the City of London underpins a huge amount of global investments in all parts of the world. And that's a critical financing enabler. It's not so much a de-risking tool. It's quite essentially reduces the country risk component of the investment for anyone who wants to put money into an energy project, into building a defense production facility, a port, anything. And it's just mathematics. You know, in order for an investor to sit and invest into a country, it needs to hit certain returns, certain internal return thresholds. And the riskier the country, and this is, you know, Standard & Poor's classifications, you know, it's not something that we have invented. The riskier the country, the higher the discounts to future cash flow. What does it mean? That then you simply do not hit that threshold. You do not put the money into the country. It's as simple as that. The absence of this solution really stops the investors from having this long-term view and say, okay, I want to invest into the country, but I do not have the means to protect my equity participation. Why is it absent? Because the international reinsurance market is not providing the second step. And for those who do know insurance, I'm sorry, I'm an insurance guy, but insurance sits here, reinsurance sits at the top. There's simply no reinsurance. So the reasons why I'm here also, we are talking to the European Commission, we are talking to EIB to set up a private-public structure which would mobilize private capital of the London insurance markets to allow investors to really come and say, okay, well, there is a solution from us. It may be a stopgap, because perhaps in 3-4 years' time, this will not be needed anymore. But that's a critical portion of the investment pipeline. And it's often overlooked, quite simply, because insurance, people think it's boring. It's your car insurance, your house insurance. But insurance is fundamental to most global in trade and investments. And absent that, you can create whatever you like as a setup. You can provide public money, but you're not going to be able to attract the critical money from international investors. And I've seen a pipeline. I mean, my people are in Kiev at the moment, discussing with Mr. Preligin. There's a very, very, very long pipelines of projects that we expect to finance. It's simply not going to be financed through the public purse. It's not going to happen.
But sorry, Fabrizio, sorry to interrupt. When you talk about mobilizing private capital into insurance, do you mean mobilizing by changing the market structure, or do you mean mobilizing by offering public capital as some kind of subsidy for private insurance?
It's utilized as a blended, almost like as a blended finance solution. So by providing, and I can give you a very pertinent example. So at the beginning of, I think it was 2023, because of the Black Sea blockade and the problem, there were no ships out of the port of Odessa. As a result, the huge production of grain in Ukraine couldn't find its way out of the country, had to be sold through trucks and trains. So it was very complicated. And apart from the safety element, it was simply the lack of insurance or the excessive cost of insurance, which precluded these ships from leaving the country. So we have set up a facility called Unity. Unity utilized 20 million of Ukraine public funds, counter-guaranteed by a European bank because that required an investment-grade guarantee to give comfort to the insurers. And that's seated as a first loss solution in a facility. What that naturally brought is the pricing from being completely unaffordable dropped down in a way that then permitted the ships to start leaving the port of Odessa full of grains. 20 millions of public money delivered tens of billions of government revenue. So it sets an example of utilizing smartly the public purse to mobilize the private sector money. So in this case, for example, it's the same concepts. You know, we're talking with the EIB and European Commission to create a first loss solution that would encourage the private sector, private insurance marketplace to come back to Ukraine and give those kind of guarantees. And we talked about mobilization of 4 times. In our calculations, it's actually 10 times mobilizations of project pipelines. So, you know, for 200 million, you potentially look at 2 billion worth of projects, because obviously equity is just a portion of the financing. So in that sense, it's not subsidizing, but it's creating the conditions for the insurance marketplace to come back in a way that it's affordable for the buyer, and the insurance market can take risks meaningfully, because they are for-profit businesses. You know, insurers are not there to do charity. They're not going to put money just for the sake of it. They want to have a proper return. And likewise, international investors, they're not going to come for charity to Ukraine. They want to come and they want to invest. They want to make money. And I don't think Ukraine wants to live off handouts. You know, fantastic country. You know, we've seen the resilience in the 4 years. There's incredible economic opportunities. We just need to be able to create those conditions. And I think that is quite a crucial little piece that we need to think about quite carefully.
Thank you very much. Pavel, welcome. Better late than never. I think a kind of theme running through the comments that your 3 fellow panelists have been making is getting right the sort of the balance between private and public sector funding. And in the context of your role now, I wonder how you see those issues.
First of all, I would like to invite you to Gdańsk.
Sure.
It's crucial. We're in process of preparing. We're well prepared to invite you and to host you in this beautiful city, the center of solidarity, the place in which started Solidarity Revolution and the changing of systems in Europe in 1989. That's the first point. The second point, we added to the program of Ukrainian Recovery Conference one more track, defense. We started to discuss defense issue during the pre-conference in Rzeszów a few weeks ago. That was, I think, really successful and the right decision of our and the Ukrainian side to add that one track more to combine our, European EU experience and NATO experience with the and technologies and money with the experience from the Ukrainian experience from the battlefield. That's I think crucial element, not only from the point of view of art of war, it's also crucial element from the point of view of future of economy. The dual use and thanks to European Commission to find the money for funds for supporting, for bolstering initiatives from that fields. That's the first elements that's offered not only for state-owner entities from our point of view, it's also offered to the private sector and to the academy and to the research centers, etc., etc. Of course, Rzeszów was a good place for that discussion because that's the heart of our aviation, of our defense production, but that was a symbol for future how we could combine that technologies with absolutely unique experience from the battle, Ukrainian experience from the battlefield, from the trenches, etc., etc. Second point, because on the end of the day I'm a politician, I'm chair of Foreign Affairs Committee and envoy and chair of Polish Council for Cooperation with Ukraine, so-called envoy of Polish Prime Minister to recovery of Ukraine. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that let's we talk about actions. If we want to reconstruct Ukraine, if we want to speak effectively about the processes of potential recovery after ceasefire, the first condition, I must say that elementary sentence: we must work on the stopping of Russian hostilities, especially after last night. The second, this from our point of view, this exercise for imagination. There is no mobilizing of businesses, there is no real reconstruction of Ukraine without real opening doors and real processes of expansion of NATO and enlargement of European Union. Let's we imagine situation after war. Let's we imagine country with the great scale of post-war syndrome, with the great problems with demography, millions of Ukrainians out of their country, great political problems, and the tension from the Russian side. That's the fundamental also from developing, especially if you want to develop businesses in Ukraine. There is no better guarantees than European regulations and using European law. Today it's a European Union. In Middle Ages it was Magdeburg law. It's not about money. It's about legal framework of doing business. It's about legal framework of the managing of the risk. That's essence of my position, and that's not a kind of case for academic analysis. That's a question of real security of my country. That's a question of future of whole Central Europe. Without that kind of best guarantees, without that legal framework for business, private or public, we will have in future huge problems. Let's we research the same situation with a similar situation with Georgia. We cannot take Ukraine out of Western institutions after hostility, after ceasefire, after peace agreement. That's a question of security of whole European Union, NATO, and the political West. That's the first step to build real guarantees for business. That's the question of model of implementation of Western model of governance of the big money which we'll use to the reconstruction. I don't see another way.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'd like first to ask, we're having this discussion 10 weeks into the Iran war. which hasn't featured yet in any of the discussions that we've had this afternoon. And I wanted to ask you how you think the Iran war affects the project of trying to support Ukraine's accession to Europe, the reconstruction. You know, the war is clearly supportive to Russia's balance of payments, has a certain set of economic effects on the Ukrainian economy, has the effect of distracting US foreign policy away from the war in Ukraine. And I wonder, Muriel, if I can start with you, how you're thinking about the effect of the Iran war on the project of supporting Ukraine.
That's a very good question. I think, to summarize my very short answer, it does not affect the project itself. Right. It affects the condition.
Ambition.
No. I mean, there's no change in that. We've been committed to supporting Ukraine, and we'll remain committed to supporting Ukraine. It only changes the conditions in which we are operating. So, but again, it has to be seen in the short-term and longer-term view. I think someone earlier mentioned the wake-up call that Ukraine is for all of us. The war in the Gulf is also showing that we need to continue de-risking ourselves from oil, generally speaking. And that's where it comes back to Ukraine being a provider of energy once we manage to anchor its security as well. So clearly there is an issue of Russia gaining more revenues from oil in the current price context, and that means that we have to step up our own pressure to ensure that the shadow fleet is not enabling Russia to profit more, and it also triggers a longer-term transformation away from an oil-based economy. So again, it's about addressing very short-term and mid-term issues at the same time. But I don't think, no, it doesn't affect the principle of our support, clearly.
Thank you.
I think wake-up call is really very, very right description. So, you know, first wake-up call was when Russia attacked Ukraine, and all the countries to the west of us figure out that there can be war, post-Second World War, you know, in Europe. This wake-up call says that everyone who believed that nothing can happen with the Strait of Hormuz because it's not in interest of any player to close it, now understand that you had to diversify way before it. For us, practically for Ukraine, you know, I think it's both a risk and opportunity. So the risk is purely military. For us, we rely on the same interceptors as Gulf countries. We use them to a bit more sophisticated way, I think, now. And obviously you mentioned that Russia is getting more money. We try to work with this from the purely arithmetical standpoint. So Russia gets higher price of oil, but we make sure that they cannot really export that much of oil. So the whole balance stays more or less the same. But in terms of opportunity, it once again demonstrates that technology which we have in Ukraine can be applied in much cheaper way than the technology which the countries in Gulf, for example, were investing. So I think those countries who were in between or trying to be neutral now understand that the world is a bit more black and white than they thought. And actually we can be helpful for them, and they can be also in exchange helpful for us, but it's a mutual beneficial cooperation, and that's what we're trying to develop and to help them to protect, because effectively what Iran is attacking them with is not very far away from what Russia is doing in terms of attacking Ukraine.
Fabrizio?
On a personal level, I'm not so sure that the Russians will benefit that much. I think it's almost like putting a Band-Aid on a chest wound at this point in time. Yeah. Yes, okay, they may get a little bit more dollar per barrel of oil, but I think the direction of the war in their economy is quite clear for everyone to see. You just look at the other day at their parade in Moscow. It was quite, you know. Anyway, that's not really a country that is swimming in money, that's for sure. From us, there is an opportunity, of course, and the opportunity to deploy some of the technology or showcase some of the technology that the Ukrainians have designed. Bring, you know, I think it's quite telling to see the Middle East, you know, asking for help and seeing this technology coming, and it can show what the future may look like. And again, I will bring it back to my words to an extent. That will require a lot of processing capability in the country. Hence, again, foreign investments. You know, the big technology company, the defense companies in Europe will want to invest in this technology, will want to put money into the country. And to do that, they will require more than security guarantees. They will also require other aspects. But the Middle East is a good example, again, of those type of protection I was talking to you about. You know, the smart buyers have bought insurance, you know, before the fact, and there are billions of dollars of damaged assets which will be indemnified through the insurance marketplace in Saudi Arabia and in the Gulf. So those types of solutions, again, provide confidence for the investors. So that is my take. I think it's a pro and con, but to say that the Russians will benefit from this, I think it's a bit of an overstatement. That's probably a personal position of mine.
And Pavel, sorry for my ignorance, I don't really know what dialogue the URC has with Washington, but I wonder what dialogue you have with Washington and whether there's any extent to which it's been affected by Washington's distraction given the war in Iran.
I just waiting for the information about U.S. delegation to URC as a first question. And from the economic point of view, you know, I think that Russia has also limit of the war economy style development. And according to my sources and my colleagues, I have also in Moscow a lot of contacts from the previous time when we met many times on the conferences. There is maximum two years to continue for Putin that kind of economy style. From the political point of view, that's interesting because it's probably the first situation in the modern history where the former colonial metropolis started war against former part of empire and didn't win during the 4 years. And my expectations and my proposal is to look for the situation on the Kremlin. And I'm sure that the limit of tolerance, that the limit of the that Putin's cronies will try to change that regime, because that regime, it's also from the point of view of the Kremlin, it's completely not effective. That's from my point of view, it's crucial. Of course, Putin will try to use the situation on the Middle East. Will try to use the situation on the Middle East to attack Ukrainian infrastructure, especially energy, or probably transport. That's the tactical. There's a tactical question for us how to be prepared for the next winter. But if we see for that situation in mid-term perspective, we should think how we will deal with the new situation on the Kremlin. That's the question, because I'm sure that the regime is not so stable like we expect, because we don't have details, don't have detailed informations about the real situation around the Putin. Our task is to keep interest around Ukraine. Many people ask about URC. Many people asking about URC. Why you organize so big conference? Of course, it will be a great occasion to sign a new agreements, to plan, to organize, to develop, design a new potential business projects. But from my political point of view, it's also important to keep interest of our Western community and to be to discuss also social and political situation and to project scenarios for the situation when Russian hostilities will stop.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to give you an opportunity to put questions to our panelists. So if you do have questions, I see, yes, lady in the front here. There's a microphone on its way to you, if you don't mind. Thank you very much for joining us, Pavel. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
If you don't mind letting us know who you are.
Chatham House member, and I have a question to Pan Yuri. Obviously, investment is going on right now, and domestic investors, Ukrainian investors who invest in domestic debt, are a big part of that. What about people who live with Ukrainian roots who live abroad and would like to invest in Ukraine right now? At the moment, as a British tax resident, a retail investor could not really invest in Ukrainian debt or equity much because there's only a few companies listed. Are you thinking of creating an instrument that would allow people with risk appetite to invest in Ukraine who don't need insurance because they understand or think they understand the situation right now to come and invest and help out and also do their bit? Thank you.
Look, so there's multiple answers I can give you to this, but to be quick, right, with time. So first of all, for the classical debt management, for the public debt management, actually having private investors is suboptimal solution in the ideal world, because normally you sell to institutional investors. That's the job. Obviously, with war, we changed this model, and now you're right that everyone in Ukraine can buy government bonds within like 20 minutes by opening the government app. And I think, to the best of my knowledge, my team already has a solution, and it works. So there are test cases from people living in UK and investing in Ukrainian government bonds. So it works. But I think your question is broader than that. And there are companies, obviously, there are Ukrainian companies which are listed in London, and those are there are companies, the private companies which are selling the euro bonds. But all those instruments are not necessarily retail ones, maybe shares a bit more than bonds. So I would say that coming of more of institutional investors who distribute to retail, more private equity fund, more funds, international asset managers who create special vehicles for Ukraine and distributing it on the back end to the retail investors, that's probably a good solution to this problem. For those who want to take a bet on the recovery of the country, will have vehicles. I don't want to do too much of PR, but there are big names on the street who are looking at dedicated facilities to invest in Ukraine. And probably that will be a next step, because in the end of the day, you need to use the facility you have here in this country, right? So when you have facilities which invest in emerging economies, you might end up having facilities which invest in subset of the emerging economy, so being Ukraine or Ukraine and Moldova as the region, to betting on the EU accession. So I think that this part of the market will develop rather soon.
Thank you. Next question. Yes, gentleman here.
Michael Pugh, lawyer and academic. Thank you for a great panel. Do you think that America sees Ukraine security and recovery as an asset? And if it doesn't, what can be done to make sure that it does?
Can I put that to you, Muriel?
I'm not American.
What can be done to ensure that it does? That's a question for you.
I'm not sure it doesn't, clearly, because the US is still engaged in the G7 work to put pressure on Russia, has been trying to lead ceasefire negotiations. I'm not sure what. I'm not sure if I agree with your premise, to be honest. Yeah.
It's an open question.
So that would be my answer.
Yes, yes. Fair enough, fair enough. Yes, Tim. I know who you are, but if probably most of the room knows who you are. But
you know. Infamous. Tim Ash, Chatham House, Russia-Eurasia Programme, also Royal Bank of Canada, Blue Bay Asset Manager. We invest in Ukraine. We have done over the years. Yuri, question for you. Could you just update us on the SOE restructurings, where we are? You mentioned the sovereign ones. And actually, a second question, and maybe not necessarily for this panel, but I mean, Ukraine clearly has a defence tech advantage, right? I mean, you know, drones, I mean, you're knocking out the park in terms of you have the capability. And I guess my question is, what's the constraint in going to scale with that? I mean, is it actually financed now? Or is it something else? I mean, what are we missing here? I mean, obviously you've got the 90 billion European money. I mean, money should be no object. But why aren't we converting that, you know, defence tech innovation advantage Ukraine has into really going to scale? I mean, is it something else? What am I missing? Is finance not a problem anymore?
Well, let me answer maybe first question, and yes, the first time Tim asked me a question as a Chatham House, not as an investor. But look, so very briefly, indeed, we have 3 state-owned enterprises, which are probably 3 the most damaged by Russia, which is Ukrenergo, the transmission operator, railways, and Naftogaz. So they're being damaged every day. It obviously affected their liquidity position and situation. They all are in different stages of negotiation with the bondholders. They're all 3 issuers of the bonds. I think they're in different stages now. So for Ukrenergo, it's very long in this process. My understanding is that they are moving already in agreement with the bondholders to the finalization. On 2 others, it's hard for me to comment in detail because they don't benefit from the state guarantee. I know that there are committees formed and there are discussions. To what extent those discussions are progressing, I have no further detail, but I think all in all the goal is to ensure that all the companies have enough of debt relief to prioritize the liquidity they have to repair the damages and to ensure they provide services before they can repay the debts.
I'm afraid we're out of time, so I can only thank our panelists very much for such an interesting set of comments. Thank you very much, and please join me in thanking them.